Welcome back to the channel, you curd nerds. We've got yet another private pilot mock check ride for you. Now, this student has really been getting after it. They have accumulated about 80 hours in a matter of 10 weeks. They've been spending a little bit of time on ground training, on ground school. They started ground school a while back, but when it comes to flying, they have cranked out 80 hours in a matter of 10 weeks, just a little over 2 months. But this student was a little rusty on their ground training, given that they started ground school a good bit ago. What it definitely seemed like is this student had a pretty good study guide and a pretty good instructor, but had never actually opened the POH and looked beyond the performance section, looked beyond the cross-country planning section, looked beyond those things that the instructor sits down and shows you. So remember, it's your responsibility to safely operate an aircraft. It's the pilot in command's responsibility to have all available information pertaining the flight, which means you need to read your whole POH, not just the performance section, not just the limitation section. You gotta read the whole thing. And crack open the Aviation Weather Handbook. That is an amazing resource. If you're struggling with aviation weather theory, crack open the Aviation Weather Handbook. If you're struggling with reading charts, go to aviationweather.gov and practice and crack open the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge and look through the keys that are provided in that book. But the student was probably about 80% of the way there, but I'll let you put your judgment in the comments. Remember, be nice. This is supposed to be training. This is supposed to be educational. This is not an opportunity for you to roast somebody in the comments. So I hope y'all learned something, and let's get into the mock check ride. Just so I get this recorded, are you okay with me recording this mock check ride for content creation, whether it be on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, etc.?
I am.
Awesome, awesome. So now that we got this going, tell us just how you're enjoying your training, what got you to this point. You are training in some fairly new airplanes, so I'm assuming you're at some nice bougie flight school. So just tell us a little bit about what got you to this point, how many hours you're at, stuff like that.
So I started flight school around 10 weeks ago, and I'm already at 80 hours. And I started ground school maybe 4 months ago, so I could get all that done before. And yeah, I'm enjoying training. It's fun.
That's
and
awesome.
I'm 18 years old.
That's awesome. Now you said 4 weeks?
No.
I
started ground school 4 months ago, and then flight training 10 weeks ago. So 2.5 months.
10 weeks ago. Oh, well, I mean, that's still, that's 8 hours a week of flying. I mean, that's a lot of flying, 10 weeks, and, getting private pilot done that quickly. I mean, it's awesome that you kind of jumped the gun, got your ground school done before you ever jumped in the airplane. Just make sure, what you might notice, what a lot of students do is they'll cram out their ground training and then they'll go flying and then they'll kind of brain dump everything from ground training. And then we start and do one of these things. And it's like, I used to know that. So yeah. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully that's not the case.
I still study a lot. So we'll see.
Awesome. So every DPE, before they start digging into questions, they're going to have really just a few things they go over, right? They're going to go over the kind of the terms of the check ride, right? There's 3 different outcomes for every check ride: satisfactory, unsatisfactory, and incomplete. Satisfactory just means that you're consistently within inside the standards. Doesn't necessarily mean that you don't momentarily fall outside the standards. Blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming you've seen the videos, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got unsatisfactory. This means that you're consistently outside the standards. It means danger to national airspace system. The examiner has to take control of the aircraft. You don't know safety related information. And then there's incomplete. The appropriate reasons for an incomplete would be things like it ran out of time, aircraft airworthiness, which, given that it's 2022 to a 2024 Archer, I'm hoping that those things stay pretty airworthy, right?
Yeah.
But it's things like that, even if, your oral ran on for 5 hours, which hopefully it doesn't. But even if your oral ran on for 5 hours and you can be like, hey man, I'm tired. I'm not up for flying today. Let's incomplete and then go and then try again at another date. That would be an appropriate reason. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So right off the bat, What documents are you going to need to bring to your check ride?
I'm going to need to bring my government photo ID, my medical, and my student pilot certificate and also my logbook proving I have my endorsements.
Solid. Now, I always like to dig into systems just because, if you don't know your airplane, the rest of it's not going to go that well, probably. So just tell me about the power plant that's in this aircraft.
So it's a 180 horsepower Lycoming engine, 4 cylinders, naturally aspirated and horizontally opposed, and air cooled.
Awesome. Fuel injected?
Yeah.
Fuel injected. Awesome. Why do we even bother fuel injecting an airplane? Like, what's the benefits of fuel injecting an airplane?
As opposed to
carbureted.
Yeah. Well, you won't get carb icing.
Okay. Yeah. Carb icing is definitely a big problem. Now, your private pilot certificate doesn't necessarily limit you to fuel injected airplanes. So it's still a good idea to know about carburetor icing. How would you identify carburetor icing?
Gradual loss in RPMs.
All right. And is there any solution for this in most airplanes?
Pull the carb heat.
Carb heat. Is your airplane going to get immediately better after you pull the carb heat?
No, it's gonna start out actually worse after you pull it.
Mm-hmm. Now, why is your fuel injected airplane not susceptible to carb heat? Like, what's different between a fuel injected airplane and a carbureted airplane? And I know, it doesn't have a carburetor, but what's happening inside that carburetor that's different from a fuel injected airplane?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, we'll just draw some stuff on Microsoft Paint just to kind of solidify that one. Because even students that do fly carbureted airplanes aren't too sure on this one. So that's why I cover it. So fuel injected airplane, you've still got a little venturi, okay, that's got a little butterfly valve, and this is connected to that throttle valve or to the throttle in the airplane, whether you have a push pull one or whether you have the lever. I forget which ones these new Archers have. Now, in a carbureted airplane, you have a little thing off the side of this little venturi called a jet. And this jet is where the fuel comes in. Okay, so we end up having a little bit of fuel coming in through here because when air flows through this venturi, as air comes in through this venturi, through this restriction, its velocity is going to increase while its pressure decreases. Okay. So when the pressure decreases inside this venturi, the fuel in here is going to start to vaporize because as you reduce pressure on a fluid, its boiling point goes down, right? But when we change something from a liquid to a gas, when we have that change of matter, when we have that change of state, it's got to absorb heat from somewhere. Okay. It's got to absorb heat from the outside air. Now, if there's any bits of moisture inside this air that's coming in to the carburetor, when it hits this fuel that's evaporating, it's going to start to condense on the side of the venturi, becoming ice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So that's really why a fuel injected airplane isn't as susceptible to carburetor icing or isn't as susceptible to intake icing as a carbureted airplane, because we don't have that change in matter. We don't have that change in state from a liquid to a gas absorbing heat from the outside area. Makes sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, since you do have a G1000, you've got a couple different notations or notifications that this airplane can bring you, right? We've got red ones, yellow ones, and white ones, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right? Now, the two big ones that you got to worry about, they're warnings and cautions, correct? What would be the big difference between a warning and a caution? Why is a warning red and why is a caution yellow? A
warning would be like I feel like a caution would be if you're approaching an unsafe state, and then a real warning is like you're already there.
Yeah. So the way your POH describes it, a warning, operating procedures or techniques which may result in personal injury or loss of life if not carefully followed, and hazards that may require immediate crew recognition and corrective action. Cautions, operating procedures or techniques which may result in damage to equipment if not carefully followed, and the need for immediate crew awareness and possible need for future corrective action. So you had the right idea, right? A warning is,
Yeah.
I got to do something now or I'm going to die. A caution is like, hey, I need to get something done or else I'm probably going to damage the airplane.
Mhm.
Awesome. Talked about the engine. Now, when it comes to that 180 horsepower, what RPM are you going to be getting that 180 horsepower at?
2,700.
It is definitely 2,700. So if you were to take this airplane up to, like, let's say Flagstaff, Arizona, I think field elevation at Flagstaff, Arizona is like 7,000 feet in the middle of summer when it's 110 degrees outside. Are we going to generate 180 horsepower?
No.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. What are some of the big things that are at play right here? What kind of altitudes are we kind of worried about when it comes to operating at high, hot airports?
Density altitude.
Okay, what is density altitude?
It's basically your altitude corrected for non-standard temperature and pressure too. So the air molecules are going to be spaced apart when it's hot and whenever you're high field elevations. So both of those together is just not a good combo.
Okay. Now that's a great scientific way of explaining it. Now break it down Barney style for me. Explain it to me like I'm an idiot. What is density altitude?
It's when it's super hot, so the airplane just is gonna have less performance because there's less air going over the wings.
Yeah, right. You could almost say that density altitude is the altitude at which the airplane feels like it's flying at.
Oh yeah, that definition too.
Yep. Now, is it only... Now, the only correction I do want to make is density altitude is pressure altitude corrected for non-standard temperature.
Okay.
So saying density altitude is altitude corrected for non-standard pressure and temperature. I just don't want some curmudgeon DPE to be like, oh, well, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. We all use the same DPE at my school.
Okay.
It's all the same guy, yeah.
All right. And I'm assuming it's I hate to say it, but it's kind of at the point where everybody knows what's going to be on the check ride.
I'm not sure. I mean, I did a mock check ride with my instructor the other day, and he told me some things that he asked. Yeah.
Okay.
About, yeah.
Solid. Now, let's talk about fuel. Now, we talked about the fact that it's fuel injected. Awesome. How much fuel does this thing carry?
48 usable.
Okay. What's the
and
total
2
capacity?
unusable.
Okay.
50 gallons.
Now, let's say you came up to an airport and you saw 3 different colors of gas. You saw red, green, and blue. Which one of these would be, which ones of these, whether it be plural or singular, would be okay to put in this airplane?
Blue.
Okay. Any other?
Not that I know of. I just know blue.
Okay. Most people just use blue. You are correct. Technically, green is also okay. I've never seen green, but it's an option. 1 second.
You're good.
I use my phone as like an extra screen up near my camera, so it looks like I'm actually looking at the camera.
Yeah.
Now, you said 2's unusable. Why is that? Why is there some fuel that you just can't use?
So there'll be fuel that drains to the bottom, and it, I'm actually not too sure why they use the unusable. I think it's for if there's any that becomes like dirty or anything like that, it's not going to be in the engine.
Well, yeah. So here,
Or
let me
used
see
by
if I can,
the engine.
yeah, let me see if I can find your fuel diagram in your POH. Because when you look at the fuel diagram, it kind of makes it a little obvious. So here's your fuel diagram, right?
Mhm.
So we got our fuel nozzles, our fuel flow transducer, our fuel distributor, fuel servo regulator, engine-driven fuel pump, electric fuel pump, filters and drains, supply line. There's the firewall. Here's your fuel selector right in between the seats, and then the tanks. Now, if you look, there's your pickup for the fuel. Is it all the way at the
Yeah.
bottom of the tank?
Nope.
That's why. It can't reach the bottom. They put a little bit at the bottom. They put a little space at the bottom. So in the event that something gets in the tank, whether it be water, dirt, etc., it doesn't end up in your fuel system.
Yeah.
That's why your drain is also right here, because the wing, it's kind of tilted inward. So anything that would get into it, gravity will just take it towards the drain. So hopefully you can get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that 2 gallons of unusable fuel? Is that part of your basic empty weight?
Yeah.
It is. How would you define basic empty weight?
I would define it as the weight of the airplane. Well, I just know it's basically the weight of the airplane with max oil and the unusable fuel.
Yes, weight of the airplane as equipped with oil at its maximum level, with any unusable fluids. Right? Let's get just a little bit into some definitions just to make sure we got a solid understanding of weight and balance before we ask any more questions on it. How would you define CG, or center of gravity?
Basically the point where you can hold an airplane on a string and it basically stays level.
Okay, and it'll balance from that point.
Yeah.
What is a standard datum plane in reference to center of gravity or weight and balance?
Like a forward CG? What do you mean a standard datum plane?
So when you say like, hey, I'm going to be sitting at this station, like I forget the Archer's specific weight and balance stuff. But let's say the seats are at 72 for the station, for the arm, when you're doing your weight and balance calculations, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that 72 measured from?
The datum?
That standard datum plane, the datum, right? What is datum?
It's like it's an imaginary kind of point where you measure everything in the plane basically from the point.
Okay. Now, what would be some of the downsides of having a CG that's maybe just a little too far forward? Maybe not outside the limit, but yeah, downsides.
Downsides would be you'd be easier to get into a stall and you have a lower cruising speed.
Okay. Is it going to impact my so I'm going to have a slower cruising speed. Why is my cruising speed going to be slower if I've got a forward CG? What's happening to the airplane? What's happening aerodynamically speaking when we have a CG that's too far forward, or at the forward limit? Let me correct myself, at the forward limit.
When you have a forward CG, you have to keep more pitch on the plane to maintain level flight. So it's going to lower your cruise speed.
Okay, so what is it increasing when I have a little bit more pitch, a little bit more nose up relative to the wind?
Angle of attack.
Okay, so what does angle of attack increase?
So
if I have an increased angle of attack, I'm asking the wing for more lift. When I ask for more lift, I also get more what?
Drag.
I get more drag, right? What kind of drag is this? Is it induced or parasitic?
It's induced.
Okay. What's the difference between induced and parasitic drag?
Induced drag is a drag that comes from lift being made, and parasitic drag is drag that's made by basically the plane shape and everything on the plane.
Okay. Do you have a couple examples of some parasitic drag?
Where the wings connect to the main part of the plane. That's one. Static wicks. And
So we've got form drag, right? This is just the general shape of the airplane, right? Like the windscreen, how the windscreen is kind of like a big wall. Oh, we have interference drag. This would be like where the wing meets the fuselage, right? So the wing's trying to generate its own little lifting area, and then the fuselage is also doing its own little weird things. But they also have things like skin friction, right? An airplane that's freshly painted and waxed and smooth, it's going to have less drag than an airplane that's been sitting out on the ramp getting bird shit on it all the time. Right? I should probably go clean my airplane.
Yeah.
So when you're doing your pre-flight, we're looking for a number of things. One of the weird things with the G1000 is you got to turn the avionics on right off the bat when you got to listen for something right when you first start your pre-flight, right? What are you listening for?
Stall horn.
Okay. Is there anything else you might be? Yeah, the stall horn. The stall horn in this aircraft is electric. But when I first turn those avionics on, I should hear some kind of whirring noise, correct?
Some what type of noise?
Like a fan.
Oh, yeah. It makes like a, yeah.
Yep. I gotta listen for the avionics fan. But when you start doing your walk around, you're looking at you're looking at your main gear. What are you looking for when you're checking out that main gear assembly?
The brake and rotor pad, the struts too.
Okay, what am I looking for on that strut? Like what would look like a normal main strut? If I saw a main strut and I could take a ruler to it and it was out by like 12 inches, I saw that strut fully extended way out like this. Would that be normal? No. So what am I looking for? Am I looking for like 4 fingers, 5 fingers, 6 inches?
I'm actually not sure about that.
Okay. So the normal gear extension for the main gear is going to be 4.5 inches. So it's about 4 fingers, all depending on how fat your fingers are. And I know you're probably not going to see any problems in like a brand new Archer, but again, your private pilot certificate doesn't necessarily limit you to a brand new Archer, does it?
Yeah.
So just, I'd say maybe read through a little bit more on that POH, because this is all stuff that's directly from the POH. 4.5 inches is really what you're looking for on that strut. Now, if you did your walk around, you saw a little bit of red fluid dripping down off of the tire. What might this be from?
The hydraulic fluid?
Yeah, hydraulic fluid. Where's that hydraulic fluid coming from? What system? There's only one hydraulic system on this entire airplane. What is it?
Yeah.
It's brakes.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, the brakes.
Yeah, brakes.
I thought you were like asking something else. My bad.
No. Here's the thing. A lot of students, when they're getting into their check rides, they're thinking the DPE is trying to trick them. They don't want to trick you. It's more paperwork for them to fail you than it is for them to pass you.
Yeah.
Right. They want to take their $800 check ride fee and go home. All right. So if it seems like a simple answer, just answer the question simply. If they need more details, they'll ask for more details. Okay. Now, does this aircraft have a trim tab?
Yeah, it does.
All right. Does it have a trim tab or an anti-servo tab?
I've always known it as a trim tab. That's what it's always been told to me as.
Okay, flight controls, dual rudder trim is mounted. Flaps are actuated manually. Horizontal tail stabilator is an all-movable slab with a trim tab mounted on the trailing edge. Okay, I guess they're calling it a trim tab in the POH now. Solid. What are your primary flight controls on this aircraft?
Aileron, rudder, and elevator or stabilator.
Okay. Stabilator. What about some secondary ones?
Flaps and trim.
Solid. How are your flaps controlled?
They're controlled by a wire. They're not
right?
electrical.
They're not
Yeah.
electric. It's
We
just
use a
manual
lever.
opera. Yep.
Yeah.
What's the point of flaps?
They're gonna be able to make you do a faster descent or a higher foot per minute descent without gaining a lot of airspeed.
Solid. Let's get into some aircraft limitations. What airspeed is indicated by the bottom of your green arc or bottom of the green tape on your G1000?
The very bottom of the green.
Yep, very bottom of the green tape. What airspeed is that indicating? Like what V speed is that?
It's not the stall speed, is it?
That is a stall speed. In what
Okay.
configuration though?
And landing configuration. Flaps.
So let's think
Or
about
is
it.
that
What's the white arc indicating on your speed tape?
Flaps.
Yeah, it's where
Or
I
like-
can start it. It's where I can have full
Yeah.
flaps. Now, the bottom of the white arc, what one's that indicating? Is that stall speed with in landing configuration or clean configuration?
That would be landing configuration.
Now, what about the bottom of the green one?
Stall speed and normal configuration.
Clean configuration, normal configuration. Now, I've got two different climb speeds in this aircraft, right?
Yeah.
What's my best angle of climb?
Best angle of climb would be VX
Okay, and what speed would that be?
64.
Why would I want to climb at VX versus VY?
If there's an obstacle near your takeoff.
No, it's not just near your takeoff, right? Even if you're on
yeah.
like a cross country and you start your climb maybe a little bit too late to clear an obstacle,
Mhm.
right? Maybe do some circles instead of climbing into the obstacle. But don't
Yeah.
don't think that you can't use VX while you're out at altitude already.
Okay.
What airspeed really isn't depicted on your airspeed indicator at all?
Maneuvering speed.
Right. What is maneuvering speed?
That's going to be where your plane will stall before it brakes, basically. Or another way to define it is full deflection of one flight control without damage to the aircraft.
Yeah. So if you can find it, I'll say, sure, you're correct. It's where the airplane will stall before you damage it. There is only one place that I have ever seen that referenced. It's not in the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's not in the Airplane Flying Handbook. It's not in your POH. It's the place that references that an aircraft will stall at maneuvering speed before imposing damage if you apply a full control surface deflection is in it's a I think it's an advisory circular in reference to Part 23, the certification of aircraft, and it only says that if your maneuvering speed is 1.3% or 1.3 times your stall in clean configuration. It's the only time it says that. So some DPEs want you to say that it'll stall before that maneuvering speed is the speed at which an aircraft will stall before damage is imposed. But if you stomp on the rudder below maneuvering speed, will the aircraft stall?
No.
No, but it won't damage it.
Yeah.
All right. If you crank the ailerons over, right? If you do a lot of other controls, it won't necessarily stall. So that part of it, I wouldn't necessarily include, but I know there's a lot of DPs out there because they were taught that way back in 1982 when they got their private pilot certificate. And then they taught their next student and their next student taught their next student that. But there's no reference that ever states that.
Okay.
Okay. But maneuvering speed is speed at which, if I was below this speed, I can apply one full quick control deflection without damaging the aircraft. Now, maneuvering speed changes with weight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Why is maneuvering speed changing with weight? Why is my maneuvering speed at a higher weight higher than it is at a lower weight?
Because it's all with the angle of attack. You have to maintain a higher angle of attack to maintain level flight. So, and also it's with the load factor too.
Okay. So, I mean, it says it right here in the POH. Maneuvering speed decreases at lighter weight as the effects of aerodynamic forces become more pronounced at higher speeds. That's really what it's saying, is that at higher speeds, I can apply more acceleration to this aircraft, but at higher weights, the aircraft is harder to move. So I'm not applying as much acceleration. Because you're right, it is about that G loading. Okay. So at lower weights, if I apply a full deflection to an aircraft and I'm above that maneuvering speed, that full deflection might be able to apply enough acceleration to the aircraft to damage it. But if I drop it below maneuvering speed, those aerodynamic forces are less. Remember, our controls are less effective at lower speeds, meaning I can apply less force to that airplane. I can apply less acceleration to that airplane at lower speeds. That's why it increases with weight, because as the airplane gets heavier, it becomes harder to move. It becomes harder to accelerate. It becomes harder to apply forces to.
Okay.
Nope. Nah, I'm fine with that. Talked about CG. Talked a little bit about that. Is this aircraft certified for flight in a known icing?
No.
No, it's not at all. How would you identify icing conditions?
What do you mean that? Like
if I'm out flying around, what was up?
Cold temperature and moisture.
Okay, so it's not just cold temperature. It's a temperature, whether it be ambient or aircraft temperature, at or below freezing, and moisture. And visible moisture would really be the requirement. Okay. The reason I add that little caveat of ambient and or aircraft temperature at or below freezing, if you were to have just fueled up an airplane, when you fill up an airplane, the wings get cold, don't they?
Yeah.
So the wings might be below freezing, even though the ambient temperature is above freezing. And if you go take off into rain, you might start accumulating icing until that fuel warms up to the aircraft temperature or the ambient temperature. But how long is it going to take for that fuel to warm up? How long is it going to take for that wing to break off that cold soaking that it got from filling it up? So far, what I would really just say is it's go and read the POH. I know it's 356 pages. It seems like there's probably a pretty good study guide. Your instructors probably provided pretty good instruction. But it's pretty common that students, when they're getting ready, especially when they go and do like a mock check ride, with somebody that's not from that flight school, somebody that's not experienced with that training program, that curriculum, the DPE that you're going to go through or that you're going to go with, they'll ask those questions that might be on the study guide, and that's that top level knowledge. And then when we dig one more, it's like, okay, we haven't read the book, we've read the study guide.
Okay.
All right. And that's really what I'm seeing so far. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I dig a little bit deeper than what some some instructors do, just because I want, when you get that private pilot certificate, I want you to feel comfortable enough to be able to go and buy your own Archer, read the POH, and go fly it.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
That's really what your certificate tells you that you can do, is go and buy an airplane that has fixed gear, a fixed gear, a fixed prop, and flaps, and you can buy it, read the POH, and go fly it.
Yeah.
All right. Limitations pretty solid. The same maneuvering speed. Everyone struggles with maneuvering speed. I'm trying to do my best to get that taught properly, but I mean, I'm only one guy. But let's get into some emergencies. Now, your airplane has memory items or immediate action items, but then it also has just checklists. for specific emergencies. Now, if I ask you an emergency that only has a checklist procedure associated with it, the correct response is I'm going to refer to the checklist. But if there's but if there's immediate action items or memory items associated with it, then we kind of expect for you to have a understanding of those memory items and be able to accomplish those tasks in order. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So what are you going to do if you have an engine fire during your start?
Damn, I start.
Yep.
I guess get the fire extinguisher and shut everything off, the fuel selector and the mixture and fuel pump and all of that, and then get the fire extinguisher.
All right. So again, this one's got some memory items associated with it. Remember, fires don't wait for you to figure it out. So engine fire during start switch, we're going to keep cranking it. All right. Remember, we got a big old fan on the front of this thing. We're going to try and blow it out like a candle. Also, when we continue cranking, the airplane is going to continue sucking into the intake. It's going to continue pulling things into the intake, and that's probably where the fire is. So we're going to use the prop to try and blow the fire out, and we're also going to try and use the engine to suck the fire into the engine where it belongs. Next thing we're going to do, you were right, we're going to cut our mixture off, but we're going to open our throttle completely so that engine can move more freely to get that prop spinning faster and to get more air flowing into the engine to, again, try and suck the fire into the engine. Next one's fuel pump off, fuel selector off, abandon if fire continues. Okay. The reason we do all of these things in this order is because that start switch, as we just talked about it, we're blowing that fan. That mixture, we're getting that cut off. But remember, that mixture controls at the engine. If your fuel pump's on, the airplane can still pump fuel to it. Throttle, that's full open, as we talked about. Fuel pump off, we want to make sure we get the fuel pump off because the last thing we want to do is abandon this thing, but the fuel pump still be running, just dumping fuel onto this fire while the fire department's trying to put it out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And then fuel selector off as well. Remember, the fuel selector is that final cut between the firewall and the engine. So if that fuel selector is off, that means no fuel can get into the engine compartment at all. And now when the fire department does show up, they're going to have an easier time getting this fire out. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, let's talk through an electrical fire in flight. What's your course of action for an electrical fire in flight?
I've never even I've only done the engine fires in flight. I've never even really done anything with the electrical.
Okay. So it's right in your POH on page 74. This is right here, electrical fire in flight. So we're back at that same kind of idea, right? We got to read through the whole POH. Is the end goal eventually to be like an airline pilot?
Yeah.
Okay. So your POH is 356 pages. Airbus POH is like 6,000 pages. And the expectation is for you to have read that whole thing by the time you show up to the simulator.
Okay.
All right. So let's get into the habit of we're going to read that POH every time we get into a new airplane. Every time we're getting for a new check ride, we're going to read through the whole POH just to make sure there's nothing new that we missed. Because at the end of the day, you've read through the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards, and you understand the standards you're being held to. Emergencies and how to respond to them are part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But since you said you've gone through the engine fire in flight, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So talk me through an engine fire in flight.
So first I would pitch down a lot and try to gain that airspeed, and I'd bank around 45 degrees and just spiral down, try to get that engine fire out.
All right. What would be like the maximum speed that you would be comfortable going up to with an engine fire in flight?
Just the top of the green arc.
Top of the green arc's not a bad place to go. Is there anything else you might want to do to try and get that fire to go out? Let's say you're spiraling down. The houses are getting bigger. The fire's still not going out. Is there anything else you could do to try and get this fire to go out? Well, where'd the fire come from? Probably a fuel leak, right?
Oh yeah, the fuel.
Okay, so how do I go ahead?
I'd probably do the fuel selector.
Yep, fuel selector would probably come off. Mixture would go off. At that point, we're going into a power off landing, right?
Yeah.
All right, so talk me through a power off landing.
I'm gonna pitch for best glide, and I'm gonna pitch for best glide. Look for a place to land, and I'm gonna try to contact 121.5 squawk 7700. Turn on my ELT, and I'll turn everything off, like the fuel pumps, the mixture, fuel selector, just so a fire wouldn't start from the airplane crashing. And I would, like right before landing, I would kind of open that door up, make sure I don't get trapped in the airplane.
Yep. If you aren't able to get that door up open, a lot of times you can kick out the window as well. They're just held in with glue.
Mm.
Okay. So don't end up getting stuck and dying in an airplane. I can boot that window out.
Okay.
All right. Now, an electrical failure seems like a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
Now, if your alternator had completely died, you ran through the appropriate checklist, and your alternator still doesn't come back on, is your engine going to die? No. So what's powering your engine?
The magnetos.
Yep. So the magnetos are definitely, they're still providing that electrical spark that you need to keep that engine running. Awesome. How long would you say you've got on that main battery?
30 minutes.
About 30 minutes. Is there any backup batteries in this airplane?
I have the emergency battery and the standby instrument battery there's a G5.
Oh, that G5 is a fancy little piece of equipment. Now that standby battery, that emergency battery that keeps the G1000 powered, does that power the whole G1000?
No. Oh, no. The emergency battery?
Yeah, that standby battery, that red switch, I think it's usually off to the left.
No, the emergency battery only gives you one comm and the primary flight display, not the multi.
Now, what about that G5? Do you have any idea how long that'll last you?
That'll last like 4 hours.
Yeah, if you look at the part number for the battery that's installed on the back thing, it's rated for like 4 hours. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
Now, if you saw in flight a red X pop up over your attitude indicator, your heading indicator, and your turn and bank coordinator, what system just failed?
The flight computer.
Well, which one? You got a couple of them.
The air data attitude heading reference system.
Yep. So they combined them now. Okay. Yep. Your ADAHARS. Awesome. Com failure, GPS failures. That's all fine. Do you have autopilot?
Yeah.
All right. What's your first course of action if this autopilot gets you in like an unusual attitude? Let's say this autopilot for some reason cranked you on over to 60 degrees of bank and 30 degrees nose up. What's your first course of action? The very first thing you're going to do?
Full power and disconnect the yoke.
Yep. Autopilot off, full power.
Or disconnect the autopilot, yeah.
Yep. That is always the first thing that you're ever going to do. Anytime there's any kind of upset scenario, airplane approaching a stall, the airplane approaching overspeed, the airplane into an unusual attitude, wake turbulence recovery. First thing you're going to do, disengage that autopilot. Even if you're not sure if your autopilot is engaged, I always say it's a good rule of thumb. Anytime you're trying to recover from this airplane outside of its normal flight path, hit that autopilot button. Did you hear about that? Did you hear about that Atlas crew that buried an airplane into the ground at like 7,000 feet per minute?
No.
No,
When was that?
I think it was like 2016. It was a little while ago. Usually, it sucks because there's a lot to learn from that incident when it comes to autopilot. But given that it was a cargo situation, it doesn't really make the news because like the only thing normal people saw was that their Amazon package was delayed, which sucks because like people died. But it was an autopilot. It wasn't even an autopilot malfunction. It was just they weren't recognizing that they needed to disengage the autopilot and get the aircraft back under control. So that's why I say no matter what situation, whatever scenario you're in, reaching and smashing that autopilot button right off the bat is a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
Now, let's say you're cruising along on your cross country, having a good old time. It starts to rain a little bit. Are you comfortable flying in the rain?
No.
No? All right. Well,
I've only flown in the rain once. I mean, let's say today.
Yeah, let's say today that you're flying in the rain. You're like, the airplane's not made out of sugar. It's not going to melt. I got places to be. I got things to do. Maybe a little bit of get there-itis. So we kind of push on into the rain and the visibility keeps dropping and dropping. And all of a sudden you're like, I can't see the ground. This is terrifying. What are you going to do?
I'm going to tell a controlling agency. I'm probably going to be on flight following anyway. I'm going to say, I'm a VFR pilot in an IFR condition, and I would ask for vectors to an IFR or a VFR airport.
Okay. First thing I'd do is turn around.
Okay.
Right?
You can just
go ahead.
If I'm on flight following, I can just turn around and they won't.
Yeah, you're on flight. You're on flight following, not flight control. Unless you're in some kind of airspace, unless they've given you like a vector, right? If ATC said, "Hey, stay this heading," it's flight following. It's not flight controlling. Unless they've given you instructions otherwise.
So like proceed on course?
Proceed on course. It's your course. You decided to change your course.
Okay. Yeah. I thought that was more like fly toward the airport, but
no, I mean, proceed on course, proceed on course. It all depends on what information you've given them. If I tell them like, hey, I plan on going a heading of 180 and they say proceed on course, they're expecting me to maintain heading 180. But if I say, hey, I'm going west.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, proceed on course. I'm like, okay, well, I decided to turn around. Sure. Say something. Be like, hey, ATC, I got into IFR. I'm turning around.
And then I guess if you can't seem to find a spot that's VFR, then that's whenever you would say, can I get vectors to a VFR airport?
Yeah. And when I say if you can't seem to find a spot, like 3 minutes max, if you're not in VFR conditions within 3 minutes of you recognizing, then start calling somebody. Now we talked a little bit about icing. But what are the two different kinds of icing that you might pick up if you were out flying around in the rain?
Structural and instrument.
Okay, yeah, sure. Structural and instrument. What are the two different types of structural icing that you might pick up?
Clear or rime.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what kind of weather conditions might be conducive to clear icing versus rime icing?
I don't really.
They're pretty similar.
Yeah, I know clear icing is formed over a longer amount of time than rime icing's formed.
Okay.
So I guess it would be a hotter temperature for clear ice to form.
Yeah, so a little bit warmer temperature usually isn't much more than 5 or 10 degrees warmer than what you would experience rime icing at. It's also the size of the water droplets that you're running into, right? Okay. So if I'm running into like heavy showers and my airplane is at a temperature below freezing, I'm going to be picking up clear icing. If I'm running into like, let's say a fog layer, or I punch into those clouds accidentally, or even just a little bit of mist, that would be more conducive to rime icing.
Okay, because it's lighter, takes less time to freeze, really.
Well, I guess, yeah. I guess you could think of it like that. Yeah. Do you have any anti-ice equipment in this airplane?
Just the pitot heat.
All right. Is there any way for you to keep ice off your window?
Oh yeah, and there's a heater for the windshield and a defroster.
Yep. Don't forget that one. I've gotten into icing in the Cessna, and I forgot it. And by the time I got out of the clouds, I was like, oh, well, I still can't see because my window's frozen.
What'd you do about that?
I turned my window defroster on, and I kind of looked out the side and opened the window and whatnot, and was like, it was not. Go ahead.
It's like waiting for your car in the morning.
Yep.
And you're like late somewhere. You gotta try and find a little hole that's clear.
That's exactly what I did. The only problem is I was trying to land an airplane.
Yeah, that's even worse.
But is this airplane certified for spins? No. So how would you recover from one if you accidentally got yourself in one?
Power idle, aileron neutral, rudder opposite of the direction of your spin, and elevator down. Stabulator down, really.
Yep.
Different.
Pitch control surface down. Why not?
Yeah.
Now, where are you most likely going to enter a spin? What phase of flight? What portion of your flight?
It happens the most on a base to final turn. People try and cheat their turn too much with the rudder and get them uncoordinated.
Yep, get some uncoordinated. I'm happy with that so far. I mean, as I said before, I'd really just say, hey, let's crack open the POH and let's read through the POH a little bit more. Page to page. I know there's study guides that are probably there to kind of help you through it. But remember, I'm assuming at one point in your life, you eventually want to buy your own airplane, right?
I don't really think so.
No? Oh, all right. Yeah.
It's a lot of work and inspections and all that.
Yeah, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad. There is a lot that goes into it, but once you get the hang of it, after about the first year or two, it becomes a little less daunting. I know the first annual came up on mine, and I'm just like, I'm gonna spend $10,000. I'm never gonna financially recover from this. And then there was a small hydraulic leak, and it was $3 in seals, and an oil change. Okay.
All right.
But really, what I was getting at is that a lot of times there's not really many instructors out there for some of these weird airplanes. There's some other creators on like TikTok and whatnot. Jillian, she just went and bought a freaking Cessna 120. I don't know of any instructors out there that are willing to teach in a Cessna 120. Her boyfriend knew how to fly it, but I mean, she had to read through the POH and figure it out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's definitely important.
So, I would just say crack open that POH a little bit more. Now we're going to get into some questions about airworthiness, maintaining an airplane, because sure, you say you're not going to go buy one. I say you're a dirty liar. You're eventually going to go buy one. Everyone goes and buys one. But let's get into some airworthiness. So you're going and doing your pre-flight, and you're making sure that all of your documents are in order, not necessarily you as a pilot's documents, since we already covered that, but the aircraft's documents. What documents need to be in your airplane for it to be legal to operate and fly?
You're going to need your annual, or your airworthiness certificate, and you're going to need your radio license if you're going out of the country, and you need your registration. You need your POH in there and your weight and balance.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's say you got out to the airplane and that little no smoking placard, it's sun faded so much that you can't read it anymore. Is this airplane airworthy?
No, it includes the placards too. Yeah, you need the placards in there.
All right. Now that airworthiness certificate, does that thing ever expire?
It doesn't expire with time. It just expires if the plane isn't kept airworthy.
Right. Plane's not kept airworthy. Destroyed beyond all reasonable repair is also another Good reason, right? You know, if you sink a seaplane, they probably aren't going to pick it up out of the ocean and repair it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now give me some examples of things that need to be accomplished to ensure that airworthiness certificate does stay valid.
So there's going to be things that the manufacturer sees that your airplane may, like if there's something wrong with your airplane, maybe you need to have it checked every so often. Or not that there's something wrong with it, but it's just safe to check it because it's susceptible to having something wrong with it. So you want to have it checked. And then it starts with the manufacturer, and I think the FAA eventually mandates it.
Okay. Now, what are those things called?
Airworthiness directives.
Airworthiness directives, when they're mandated. Now, let's say you go and buy a brand new Archer from Piper. They're a wonderful company. They throw a great party at Oshkosh every year. So if you do go buy one, you get invited. But they send you a little letter in the mail, and they say, hey, we think you need to check this thing out. Is that an airworthiness directive?
No.
No, what would that be called? A nice letter? I don't know.
I don't. Maybe
it's called a service bulletin.
Yeah, service bulletin.
Service bulletin, right? So we've got two different kind of notifications about aircraft maintenance that are above and beyond just the standard maintenance. We've got service bulletins and airworthiness directives. Service bulletins, they are recommended maintenance items that come from the manufacturer. Airworthiness directives, they generally start as service bulletins, and then the FAA eventually mandates them into airworthiness directives. Are there any examples of airworthiness directives on this airplane? I know it's pretty new, so it better not have any.
No, I think there is one, but I'm not. I remember my instructor told me, like probably over a month ago. I think it was something on the wings. I'm not super sure.
It's a wing spar inspection. They had a wing snap off on a check ride like 10 years ago.
Okay.
So now they inspect the wing spars every year. Or I don't know if it's every year, every 100 hours. I forget how often they check them. Have you ever seen the maintenance logbook of your airplane?
No.
Ask your instructor. I know a lot of flight schools, they try to keep them like close to their chest because they don't want a student spilling Diet Coke all over it.
Okay.
But if just ask, be like, hey, I'd love to actually look at a maintenance logbook so I know what these things look like and I know what I'm actually looking for. But let's say that we did get that maintenance logbooks in our hands. What items are we looking for in that logbook to see that they're accomplished in the appropriate time frame to make sure that this airplane can continue to operate as part of this flight school?
Like the inspections?
Yeah, what inspections, what maintenance items?
You're going to need your annual inspection.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need your VOR inspection every 30 days. That's only required if you're doing instrument training. You're going to need your 100-hour inspection because it's for flight school. You're going to need your altimeter and static inspected every 24 months, and your transponder inspected every 24 months. And your ELT inspected every 12 months, and an hour of cumulative use, and half of its useful battery life, and if it's been on for an unknown amount of time.
Awesome. Now, you're saying half of its useful life. So obviously your phone has a battery percentage on it. If your phone reads 50%, is that what they're talking about? That like it's reading 50%, or like I've got? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say no. It's not about that. It's like I just know they don't read it in terms of that. It's something else, but so like half of its useful battery life.
So it's expiration date on the battery.
Okay.
Okay. So this battery that I've got in my hand expires in 2031. So exactly, right? So halfway between when you got it and that date on its expiration, or halfway between when it went in service. Now that 100-hour inspection, you said this one obviously requires a 100-hour inspection because it's part of a flight school. But let's say you bought an airplane and you started doing pipeline patrol with your own airplane. Like you're out flying around and you're just looking at pipelines and getting paid for it. I know that's technically you'd need a commercial certificate and whatnot for that, but let's just roll with it. Would this airplane need a 100-hour inspection for you to go do that?
No, it would not.
No, it wouldn't. Now, let's say you bought an airplane and you did realize that, Cheese Pilot was a dirty liar and the maintenance is expensive and it is a big deal. So I need to start renting this dang thing out for me to afford this maintenance. If you started renting out your airplane, would it need a 100-hour inspection? No. So what are the two instances in which a 100-hour inspection is required?
It's gonna be if it's for compensation for carrying passengers, or if it's if the instructor and the plane is being provided to you from someone else.
Awesome. Instructor and plane being provided is kind of a package deal, and also carriage of passengers other than crew for compensation or hire. Okay. Now, let's say you walked up to this aircraft and that standby G5, that G5 just won't turn on. You powered up the airplane, got it all started up, and then all of a sudden you realize, crap, the G5 didn't turn on. So you taxi on back, and now you're figuring out, is this airplane even legal for me to go fly? Where would you first start? Like what document, what reg would you go first look at to see if this thing needs that standby G5?
I would check 91205.
Okay, so what does 91205 tell you to check? Well, let me rephrase that. What? I don't need you to rattle off the whole thing. Based on 91205, is this G5 required?
No, but you're gonna want to check your kind of equipment list for something like that, because not every plane's gonna have a G5. Exactly.
Not every airplane's going to have a G5. Now, your KOEL, your kinds of operation equipment list. Let's go take a look at it. Where'd it go? There it is. Do you have one that's available to you right now or no?
I just look at the POH online for it.
Okay. Let's go take a look. Where's it hiding at? Now, do you happen to know what regulation tells you to go check your KOEL?
91213.
91213. What other items might you look in? Like, let's say you checked your KOEL. Is there anywhere else you might want to look? Where the hell is your KOEL?
I just know. I mean, we don't have an MEL, so it's not that. But is that what you were referring to, or are you looking for something else?
I mean, we've got an MEL if the aircraft does have an MEL, but there's a couple other things. There's STCs, right?
Yeah.
So supplemental type certificates. What about our, not necessarily supplemental type certificates, our type certificate? Type certificate data sheet. That's going to, now don't get me wrong, type certificate data sheet. Obviously, the G5 is not going to be on the TCDS. Because the TCDS says that this airplane's supposed to have like an IO 360. So, you can't K-swap your Archer kind of idea.
Yeah.
Descriptions, operations, airplane handling. I can't find your KOEL. We're not going to spend the next 10 minutes me trying to track it down.
I looked at it yesterday, actually, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
Solid. Now, let's say, yay, you passed your private pilot certificate. Yay. What can you do now that you couldn't do before?
I can pay less than, or I can pay the prorated share, not less than. I can pay more or the prorated share of the cost of that flight. I can act as a salesman with 200 hours. I can fly PSC as for a charity. I can do search and rescue too. I can carry passengers. I can also tow. I can tow a glider, and I'm missing something, aren't I?
No, I mean that's fly at night, fly into Bravo without an endorsement.
Yeah, just little specific stuff.
Yeah, little things like that. Don't forget, if you are going to bring up the glider, it does require more training.
Okay.
Okay. So
yeah, it's what 61, 69, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you,
I think
it is 61, 69. But just know that you can't just be a private pilot and then just be like, all right, hook them on up, let's go. I think you have to do like 3 tows in a glider or something like that. Like you have to go get you have to actually go get in a glider, but not necessarily get your glider certificate. Okay. Now let's say your mom comes to visit you, right? I don't know if you're still living with your mom or whatnot, but you get your private pilot certificate and your mom's like, oh dear Lord, I'm gonna go visit my baby down wherever he's going to school. So she flies into the closest Bravo airport, right? She picks up a rental car, drives her way on out to your flight school. You take her out for a flight, and she's like, oh, dear Lord, this is so fun. How about you just drop me on off at that Bravo airport over there so I can leave my rental car here so I don't have to deal with Hertz no more. I don't know if that's your mom's accent, but we're going to assume that she's a Southern debutante. Are you allowed to do this?
No, they would see that as compensation, dropping her off somewhere like that.
Yep. And the real big problem is like the fact that she brought it up, the fact that it was her idea. She's saying, hey, I'll give you money to take me here. But if it's like, hey, mom, how about you return your if you went to your mom and you're like, hey, mom, how about you return your rental car out here? And we could just hop on a flight to that Bravo airport. I was going to go there anyway for X, Y, and Z reasons. So that you don't have to deal with dropping off that rental car, help shave a little bit of time off your commute. That would be okay. But the reason it's okay is because it was your idea.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now let's say you go through with that plan. You're going to go drop your mom off at this Bravo airport. So you're listening to the ATIS on your way there. What weather do you need to hear on that ATIS for you to ensure that it's safe and legal for you to go fly there?
I would need a visibility of at least, well, it would depend because at that airport, it might be VFR, but along my route, it might not. So are you just looking for like a VFR?
Yeah, just the VFR at the airport. Like if let's say the Bravo airport is, I don't know, a 10-mile flight. So it's VFR where you're at. It's VFR, okay. What are the VFR requirements for that Bravo airspace?
You need to be 1 mile clear of clouds, 1 mile visibility clear of clouds.
3 miles of visibility and clear of clouds.
Oh, I was thinking of like golf.
Yeah, golf. Yes.
I don't know. I just got mixed up.
So, I mean, golf is it's 3 miles and the 152 rule. So you like mixed up golf and Bravo. So the way that I remember this is the way I remember the VFR weather requirements is every airspace other than golf requires 3 mile visibility. Golf requires 1 at day, 3 at night.
Mm.
Now, when it comes to cloud clearance, every airport requires me to be 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontal, except Bravo, where I just need to be clear of clouds. Okay. Now, if we go above 10,000 feet, a couple things change. Echo, I now need 5 miles of visibility with 1,000 feet above, 1,000 feet below, and 1 statute mile visibility. And that's the same thing with golf.
Mm. I have all those like memorized. I don't know why I said that, but I just got it mixed up.
No, it's fine. Now, let's say you went to this Bravo airport. You hang out with your mom for a little bit more. Then she goes and gets on your flight, or gets on her flight, And then you get back into the airplane and you realize the ceilings have dropped down. It's like 2,000-foot ceilings with 2-mile visibility and some rain. But your home airport that's like 10 miles away is showing VFR clear in a million. Are you stuck at this Bravo airport, even though it's clear in a million at home?
No, you're not stuck. You can ask for special VFR.
Okay, so what is let's say you get cleared for special VFR. What are your VFR requirements now?
For special VFR, I think, would that be 1 mile clear clouds too?
That is 1 mile clear of clouds. Okay. Right. Now let's get a little bit into some aerodynamics. Let's talk about stalls. What is a stall?
That's when the laminar air or the laminar flow of air over your wings kind of breaks and becomes uneven, really.
Yeah, it becomes uneven and turbulent. So what happens to the aircraft, like from the seat perspective?
It's gonna buffer. You're gonna feel like bumping, really.
Mm-hmm. So you're gonna feel a little bit of vibration, some bumps, maybe a little bit of shaking in the yoke from that turbulent airflow coming off the wing. Are we gonna be able to continue to maintain level flight?
No.
No, right? So stall is. Now, when am I going to stall? Like, what? Why am I stalling? Why is this laminar airflow separating off of the top of the wing?
Because you've exceeded the critical angle of attack.
Okay. What is angle of attack? How would you define the phrase angle of attack?
Just the chord line to the relative wind. That angle is going to be angle of attack.
Okay. What is chord line?
It's an imaginary line from the trailing edge to the leading edge of your wing.
Okay. We talked a little bit about flaps earlier, but what are flaps doing to my chord line?
They're making your chord line more up because it makes your trailing edge lowered, so your leading edge is going to be, or just the line in general is going to be higher up. It's going to increase your angle of attack.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to increase my angle of attack. Solid. Now your airplane, this is what your airplane looks like, isn't it? Maybe a different paint job. Yeah. But as you can see, your airplane, the wings kind of tilt up towards the tip. You see how it's lower here at the root and higher here at the tip?
Yeah.
What angle is that called? What is that called?
Dihedral?
That is dihedral. Why do we put dihedral on training airplanes?
You want to stall. I think you want to stall basically at the root of the wing. You want to stall that part first because if that part's stalled first, you still have you still can control better with your ailerons.
Okay. So you might be thinking
more wind over that side.
So you might be thinking of the angle of washout, which is when the wing is kind of twisted from the root to the tip.
Okay, yeah, that's
where the root is twisted higher relative to the fuselage than the tip.
Dihedral is because. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's washout, and that's what's causing the shape of the wing, and also the fact that there's that washout angle is what's causing the root to stall first.
Okay, and dihedral is, I think I got that. So it's, I guess, so the wing, if you're getting bumped around in the wind really, and then the wing is tilted up, so if you get twisted one side, it's gonna be level instead of a downward angle, and that's harder to control.
Oh yeah, so it's going to be level.
It's more stable.
Yeah, it's going to be stable. You could think of it almost kind of like the keel of a boat, right? So the keel of a boat is a really heavy spot that keeps the boat upright. It ensures that gravity swings that boat or swings the bottom of the boat down into the water. That's kind of what this dihedral is doing, so that when this airplane gets a little tilted over, it's more into the relative wind. So it's going to generate more lift than the wing that's up, that's actually bleeding this lift up off over here, meaning that it's going to try to bring itself back. It's got dynamic stability. When it's disturbed, it's going to trend back to stable.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. When it's dynamically unstable, like an F-16 or an Antonov that's got anhedral, where the wings point down, then when you go to tilt it over, it's going to want to continue rolling over.
What? So like the C-17 like has that. Why would you want to put the anhedral in a plane? Is there a benefit for that?
It becomes a lot more agile. It makes it roll. So it increases its roll rate.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Because like let's take a look at this. Right. If I've got this airplane, and I've got this anhedral, when I tilt over, the wing that I'm lifting is now more into the relative wind, making it generate more lift, helping increase my roll rate.
Okay.
Right. C-17 being a military aircraft and it needs to get in and out of some places kind of quick. It needs to be able to whip itself over, even being massive.
Mm-hmm.
F-16, same idea. The F-series fighters, they're so dynamically unstable. They need fly-by-wire because the pilots can't control them. They're not fast enough with how unstable the damn thing is. At least that's what I've heard. I've never flown one. Now talk to me about what is adverse yaw and why does it happen?
Adverse yaw is the tendency for your airplane to yaw in the opposite direction of your turn. And it happens because your induced drag, you're going to be creating more lift you're going to be creating more drag on the wing that's up because it's creating more lift and it's just going to kind of pull the airplane back, yaw to the other side.
Okay. Is there any design features in your aircraft other than the rudder that are built in to try and counteract adverse yaw?
We have differential ailerons.
Okay. So what are differential ailerons? What's the...
So the aileron I think it's the aileron that's up it's 20 degrees versus the down aileron goes 15 degrees. Or drive it backwards.
You've got it correct. The aileron that is tilting up, not the wing that's going up, but the aileron that's tilting up goes up higher. I don't know if it's 20 degrees or 17 degrees or what have you. But it goes up higher than the one that's going down to try and create almost like an air brake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when you first, let's say we taxied down to the end of the runway, right? And we first applied that full power. I need a lot of right rudder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that first application of power, which left turning tendency is really more at play?
It's going to be torque.
It's definitely going to be torque. How would you describe torque?
So the propeller is going to be spinning clockwise, and it's going to be producing more thrust on the right side of the plane, I guess, and it's going to make the airplane want to go left.
So that's not torque. Torque is just Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal yet opposite reaction.
Yeah, saying P factor, right?
Yep. Does P factor happen at level flight? Like if the airplane just flat on the ground, is P factor really at play? No?
P factor is going to be in it's going to be in whenever you're at a higher angle of attack.
Right. Because that downward spiraling blade or the blade that's swinging downward has a bigger bite of air. It has a bigger angle of attack than the upward swinging blade, right?
Yeah. Apparently I got told my DP hates the word bite. He wants to hear like angle of attack of the prop.
Okay.
That's just what I got told.
Yeah, you're good. It's always fun to hear the little idiosyncrasies from some DPEs. There's like, I hate the word bite when it's referring to. If the phrase bite makes you understand that angle of attack is how much the wing or the aerofoil is trying to take out of the air. That's fine.
I think it makes sense, but yeah.
Now
I'm just not gonna say that, I guess.
Now, what is there's one that students really struggle with. Can you kind of describe to me a gyroscopic precession?
Yes. So the propeller is the gyro, and I struggle with it too. I just know that it's going to be the force from the propeller is going to be felt 90 degrees after.
Yeah, in the direction of rotation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I pitch up, is gyroscopic precession a left turning tendency or a right turning tendency?
It's a right turning tendency. It's
all right.
Tailwheel airplane's gonna, because tailwheel airplane's gonna basically pitch down to take off, right? Which
Yeah.
makes it a left turning for them. But
Yep. And that's where it was written when, like, it was described as a left turning tendency. It was written when every airplane out there, you know, rode around on its tail.
yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty solid understanding. Gyroscopic precession really just says that, like, sure, if you really want to get into the physics, it can be a lot more complicated. We're pilots, not physicists. Okay.
Yeah.
It really just says, right, when you apply a force to a gyro, it's felt 90 degrees in the direction of rotation. So
Yeah.
to put into the context of an airplane, when I pitch up, it's technically bringing the airplane to the right. Now let's get into some aeromedical, and then we're going to talk about navigation and weather. Now let's say you just turned on the heater, all right, in your airplane, and now you've got a passenger that just all of a sudden just took a nap. What might they be experiencing?
Carbon monoxide poisoning.
Okay, and what kind of hypoxia would that be?
So that'd be hypoxic or hypemic.
So be hypemic. Hypoxia is lack of O2 absorbed by the body due to lack of pressure. Right? So altitude. Hypemic is the inability of the blood to carry oxygen due to something else binding to it.
Okay.
What would you do to try and alleviate this?
I would turn off the heater, and I would pitch down or I would try to get to a lower altitude.
Okay. Is there anything else you could do to try and clear out this carbon monoxide? You got fresh air inlets, right?
Oh yeah, I would open my air.
Yep. I know some archers, you can't open that little window off to your left in flight. So some they say you can, some they say you can't. Either way, get fresh air.
Yeah.
Now, can you give me an example of stagnant hypoxia that's not related to G-forces?
Stagnant hypoxia, you could say if you're in a plane sitting still for a very long time, that's whenever you could have stagnant hypoxia.
Okay. Now, when might I feel the effects of this? Like,
when you get out of the plane, try to stand up.
Yep. That's exactly it. So, you know, if you've got a buddy that's not used to sitting around for hours, or, you know, I hate to say it, but sometimes some overweight people are a little bit more susceptible to this, you know, give them a warning. Like, hey, we've been sitting for 3 hours. Blood might be pooling up in your legs. You might get a little dizzy if you stand up real quick. Okay. So, cause last thing you want to do is get to your destination or, you know, get where you're going. They stand up, pass out, punch a hole in your wing with their forehead from passing out.
Yeah.
Now, what can you tell me about basic med?
Basic med's just a way for you to be able to fly. I mean, I guess only people that want to fly for fun really use it, but you can basically be able to fly without needing a medical from an AME. You can go to a family doctor and get approved for your basic med.
Awesome. Now, let's say you've got a buddy that lost his medical for some reason or another. Can he go get basic med?
No, you have to have passed your last medical after July 14th, 2006. Okay,
solid. Now, for some reason, you decide that you're gonna start using basic med, and you also went and got, you know, an SR-22 Cirrus with a service ceiling of 24,000 feet. Can you go on up and cruise at flight level 220 if you've got the oxygen and everything associated, if all you're on is basic med?
No, basic med is limited to 18,000 feet.
Perfect. Let's get into some navigation. So you're seeing the screen that I'm looking at?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if it's not big enough, you can just click on me and it'll make my little thing bigger so you can see what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Solid. Now, You said you're operating out of Raleigh, Durham, and going to Kingston, right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, I know this one's kind of a softball question, given that you operate out of this airport. But what airspace is this?
Charlie.
Right now, what's your minimum equipment requirements to operate in Charlie airspace?
I'm going to need two-way radio, a multi-transponder, and a ADSB out.
All right. Now, let's say I live at this private airport over here, Coxfield. What equipment would I need to have on my airplane for me to be legal to operate out of this airport? I'm not punching on up to 2,000 feet. I'm going to stay, fairly low, hang out in the pattern at my airport, stuff like that. What equipment would I need?
You would just need your two-way radio. Is it? I think you only need it I think you only need the transponder and the ADSB if you're flying above Charlie, correct? Or is it?
It's within the lateral boundaries.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if I'm under it, they still want to know that I'm under it.
Okay.
That's the idea behind it, is them being able to keep track of where I'm at.
All right.
All right. What are these little dashed purples right here?
Oh, that's an extension of Echo.
Okay, so where does the Echo go to out here? Like what altitude?
It goes to the floor. It goes from the floor to I think 4,400.
So this one's the Echo.
It goes to 1,700.
Yep, there it is. What is this little flag right here?
It's a VFR waypoint.
What about this star?
That star means. How do I know that? That means there's a beacon.
There is a beacon there. Now, what about this star next to the L?
It's going to be most likely pilot-controlled lighting.
All right, 99.9% of the time it is pilot-controlled lighting. That star means that there is something in the chart supplement about the lighting at the airport. 99% of the time, it's pilot-controlled lighting. But there's sometimes in this that's like helicopters control their lighting on this runway or on this frequency for the helipad.
Okay. Interesting.
But there's no actual pilot-controlled lighting beyond the helicopters controlling the helipad lighting. Okay.
Okay.
I think I've seen that once, but it's a thing, right? The last thing we want is you just smashing the button, wondering why the lights won't turn on.
Yeah.
Now, what is this little dashed, line with all the lines going inward airspace?
It's gonna be a military operation area.
All right. Do I need a clearance to punch into this military operation area?
Nope.
No. So what do I need to look for? Why do we even bother telling us that military operation areas exist?
Because there's high volume of pilot training in them.
It's not necessarily high volume of pilot training. You could see low, fast moving, hard to see aircraft. Okay. Some of them there's a lot of pilot training in them. Some of them there's not. I mean, out in Arizona where I did a lot of my training, there was A-10s flying all over the place. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Now we're looking at your destination. How long is the longest runway at your destination?
It's 11,500. I think that's the longest runway in North Carolina, by the way, for a civilian.
Oh, well, that's exciting. I mean, you've got enough to get like 3 stop and goes in there.
Yeah, for real. It's really long.
Yeah, it is. It is. That is kind of nuts. Now, given that it's such a long runway, is there any kind of illusions or any kind of illusions that you might experience on a long runway versus a short runway?
A long runway, you would think that you're closer to the runway than you really are.
So would I end up coming in high or low?
you would end up coming in low.
So if I think I'm closer, wouldn't I stay high?
Oh, yeah. It's high.
Yep. Now I've got two different airports right here. I've got this one right here. Well, let's use these two. They're closer. I've got this one right here and this one right here. This one's empty and this one's filled in. What's the big difference between the filled in one and the empty one?
The empty one is no hard surface for landing, and the filled in one is just going to be a normal runway.
Normal, a defined hard surface. I mean, normal isn't necessarily.
Okay.
You know, I'd be a little wary of using the word normal because, I mean, if it's a bunch of steel plates out in the middle of the desert, that's technically a hard surface.
Okay. I've never seen that before.
The military does it, and you know, if they make like an impromptu airfield and then they abandon it and open it to the public.
Okay.
All right. Just saying that the idea of normal, especially when you get into like some more remote airports, don't necessarily get the same service, same maintenance and whatnot.
Yeah.
Now, this is a restricted area. Do I need a clearance to enter this?
Yeah.
Or, who would I talk to?
Probably the Air Route Traffic Control Center.
Okay. Where do I get the frequency for the controlling agency of this restricted airspace?
The legend.
Okay. Yep. So the legend on the outside of the chart. Or with Preflight, just tap it.
Yeah.
What is this blue dotted with the line around it?
Is that gonna be like a lake bed or like a lake that might not have water in it?
Okay, so this one right here, dots and the line.
Oh, is that a wilderness area?
That is definitely a wilderness area.
Okay.
Is there any restrictions associated with this wilderness area?
They ask you stay 2,000 above the height of the area, but it's not restricted. It's not a restriction, really.
Okay, yep. But just be wary. There are some that do have restrictions. There'll be like a little block off to the side. I can show you one. There's one right here. So look, wilderness area, right? But then there's a restriction.
Okay.
I
see that.
They're far and few between, but they do exist. Now, what is this little circle right here, or this little 0 and 8 right here?
It's going to be in the area. There's going to be it's the height of the tallest obstacle or elevation, rounded up to the nearest 100 plus 100.
I think it's normally +3, but you could be right.
Either
way, okay. Yeah, I think it's +300 in non-mountainous, +500 in mountainous.
Okay.
Well, let's look at the legend. Might be on the legend. Charlotte. Ain't no shame in looking something up.
Yeah.
I look shit up all the time. It's not in the legend. I would have to actually go to the chart supplement probably. Length, longest runway. Yep, doesn't look like it's in the legend. So yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up.
I might be wrong, but I think that's what I remembered. But
yeah, I'll look it up later, and I'll put it in the Discord for when I get the answer.
All right, thank you.
I'd say so far pretty solid on reading the chart. I'm not really any big issues so far. One thing that 99% of students don't have a whole lot of experience with, so they're not comfortable, they don't recognize it, is the ADIS, right? So these these purple dots, This is the ADIZ. It's the Air Defense Interdiction Zone or Identification Zone. If you cross this coming into the United States without the appropriate clearance or flight plan, that's when you'll get interdicted. Some fun jets will come hang out with you. Now, how do you tell the difference between interdiction and jets just happen to be near you?
An interdiction, they're gonna rock your wings and then try to fly ahead of you and make you follow them.
Okay. Now let's say I don't recognize that as an interdiction. They're going to come back and do that again. But what are they going to add to that little display to make sure that they get my attention?
Some flares.
Yep, they're going to add some flares. Now, let's say I still don't pay attention. Is there another try?
There is no third try.
There is no third try. Guns hot, too close for missiles, switching to guns. Yeah, don't fuck around. It's a D VFR flight plan. Okay, defense VFR flight plan. They'll give you a time window in which you're supposed to cross the ADIZ. You're going to be on flight following. If you're going to be late or you're going to be early, try and get an amended clearance. Okay, it's just like a taxi clearance. You're not just going to all of a sudden go, I want to take Golf instead of Echo. Yeah. Okay, you're going to get an amended clearance if you need one. Okay. When you are coming back from from wherever you happen to go, you and the boys flew down to, I don't know, the beach in Mexico to I don't know. You're going to want to come back through an AOE or an airport of entry. And the way that you identify them is it says AOE. Okay. So customs is here. I think AOPA puts on a course for international flight if you really want to take it. But just don't think that you can just file a VFR flight plan and send it.
It's crazy. I heard a crazy story about someone crossing the ADIZ. I don't know if it's real, but someone said this person wanted to basically unalive himself, and he wanted to do that he just thought that would be a good idea to try and do that with. So that's what he did, and they ended up not shooting him down, and his plane ran out of fuel, and he just crashed, and then he lived, and he got just sent to jail. But that sounds like something that's probably made up or something, but I heard that on a YouTube video.
I never heard that story. I mean, I guess it's not that far out of left field for it to really be that. I mean, I guess I could hear that something like that happening.
I don't know. That would be crazy.
Yeah, no, I knew that there was. I've heard stories of people doing it accidentally, clipping that corner that we were at. That's happened before. Oh yeah,
when people died.
Well, no, they didn't die, but they got interdicted, and they had to go to an AOE and talk to customs and apologize. And the instructor's because it was with a student too, so the instructor's certificate was suspended while the investigation was done and whatnot. So I mean, nobody died, but they ended up coming from here to somewhere over here, and they ended up clipping this corner or something accidentally. I don't know much about it. I stay away from it. Yeah, I don't mess around with it. I want to go to Canada one day, but I don't know. Yeah, reading a chart, I wouldn't necessarily say anything too bad. Most students don't know much about the ADIZ. That's why I just cover it right off the bat instead of asking you questions about it, trying to wedge stuff out that's just never been covered. Let's go look at aviationweather.gov. I'm going to look at, I like this one first. No, not segments. Not that one. That one. Now, as a private pilot, I'm assuming you haven't really spent too much time looking at this chart, have you?
I look at it a decent amount.
All right.
We go over it.
So what are you looking for? When you take a look at this chart, what led you to this chart? What was your decision or your thought process that said, hey, I need to go check a prognostic chart?
If you're really needing to check this, you're probably going to be flying decently far away and maybe going to stay there for a few days.
Solid. Yeah. Decently far away, maybe hanging out for a few days. I use this chart all the time if I'm going camping, especially if I'm going camping where I know I'm going to be outside of
Yeah.
any kind of cell service or any kind of way for me to get a reasonable weather briefing on my way out. There's a lot of islands and stuff in the middle of Lake Michigan that I've gone to. So, we can look at it and go, hey, it's high pressure right here. If I plan on leaving tomorrow, crap, it's low pressure. Let me see if I can push it out another day or two. The low pressure's still hanging out. What about another day? Okay, high pressure's here in 3 days. Well, I plan on staying for like 3 or 4 days. All right, high pressure's going to hang out. So if I wait 3 days, I'll be able to camp for 3 or 4 days and I'll still be able to leave.
Okay.
Right. That's my kind of thought process on it. No, we don't want that one. Boring. All right, there we go. Now, looking at this METAR and TAF, is there anything that's either currently happening or happening in the future that might bring you concern as a private pilot?
Let's see. Gusting 19 winds in the TAF, that's one. Rain shower, scattered 2,500. I mean, that's not really a ceiling, but that's, and on top of rain shower, it's kind of be a lot that I wouldn't really want to fly into as a new private pilot.
All right. Not bad. We got light rain showers. It seems like as the day goes on, maybe the weather's going to be getting worse. I know you probably don't know this one. Even I had to look this one up. ACSL, distant south. That's standing lenticular clouds. So what kind of weather was associated with standing lenticular clouds?
I guess
it's got something to do with winds and big changes in the wind.
so. Like gusting wind, or
Well, not just gusting winds. You ever heard the phrase of mountain waves?
Oh yeah, mountain waves.
So if I've got standing lenticular clouds sitting over top of mountains, what would I experience near those mountains? Turbulence, big mountain waves. Those rotor waves or those rotor currents. It's a really cool picture that I like to show students. Mountain wave weather images. So this is really what I'm talking about. So standing lenticular or cap clouds. This is what that METAR was reporting, is that there was these kind of clouds either sitting on top of the mountains because there's a strong wind ripping across the mountains. But we're obviously not going to be operating up here at this level, so we're not really worried about the mountain wave. But what we are worried about is this rotor cloud circulation or this rotor circulation down here. What you're gonna try and stay away from the mountain, obviously. So you're gonna be right here where this rotor is gonna be with this huge downdraft pushing you down into the valley.
Mm.
Okay. That's all, right? So if we see standing lenticular clouds, we're worried about mountain waves. Since we're not going to be operating at the altitudes where we're going to experience mountain waves, we're more worried about that rotor turbulence down at the bottom.
Okay.
And if we look at the Rocky Mountains area, because we just looked at Salt Lake City, if we look at the Rocky Mountains area, winds and temps, we should see some pretty stiff winds kicking around here somewhere. Like this one right here. What's this one?
It's 340 and a 104 knot wind. Or no,
So-
100 knot wind.
100 knot winds. And the temperature is going to be negative 40. And we've got even stronger wind right there showing it, 118 knots. So we can see where those
Yeah.
mountain waves came from, that really strong wind ripping across the top of those mountains.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And you can even see them on the satellite imagery. At least you should be able to. See if I can scroll this back a little bit. Yep. So you see how you can see these breaks in the clouds as the wind goes up with the wave, it gets up to its condensation point and drops off that condensation in a ridge of clouds and then drops on back down. And then as it comes back up with more turbulence and more waves, it comes up and drops off another little bit of moisture. You can see it really well over here as well. So just by looking at satellite imagery, you can tell that there's going to be a lot of mountain waves in this area.
Okay.
What else do I want to check? Let's go back to decision reporting, symmetry, or imagery. God, this weather is crap today over on the westbound. So we can see down here, moderate or greater turbulence is identified by the orange circle. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, in this orange circle right here, what altitude would I experience turbulence?
18,000.
18,000. What level of turbulence would it be? Moderate, severe, extreme?
It just says moderate or greater. I'm not.
Okay. So it's identified. It's identified by these little mountains. Okay. So if I see one mountain, it's moderate. I see two mountains, like them stacked right on top of each other.
Oh, okay.
Severe. Three mountains, extreme.
All right.
All right. I probably still shouldn't go fly in it. All right.
Yeah. Nah.
Now we see this blue line. This blue line indicates the freezing level.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, North Carolina, it's right here, right? Is that one North Carolina? I don't know my states.
That's Virginia.
That's Virginia. I don't know my states at all. But I try to remember with like the chef's hat and the frying pan and the chicken and whatnot, but I never remember it.
Yeah.
But so in Virginia, what would the freezing level be?
12,000.
It's 12,000. So if there's visible moisture and I climb on up to 12,000 feet, is that known icing conditions?
Yeah.
That is the definition of known icing conditions. All right. So far, anything outside of the POH, not too bad. Not too bad. Like my only real gripes were just, it seems like he had a really good study guide when it came to systems. And I just say crack open the actual book. Your understanding of aerodynamics were pretty solid. We got mixed up between dihedral and washout. Maybe just try to, what it seemed like it was happening more often was that this might be like the first, I know you said you had a mock check ride before with your instructor. So I just say maybe do a little bit more time verbalizing your answers so that you can make sure you don't mix up what you're trying to say. I wouldn't necessarily say build a script because it's kind of obvious when you come in with a script, but
yeah,
talk about these things more often, verbalize it so that when you do get asked the question, you know what words to go pick out of your brain. Right. Yeah.
Cause I've never really verbalized it before. So it's different. I was like, I kept spamming the word basically. I don't know why. I just kept coming out.
and that's when you spend more time, speaking in public or talking about something, you get a little bit more comfortable talking about it. Right.
Yeah.
But beyond that, reading charts, reading weather, I'd say go crack open the Aviation Weather Handbook, because we kind of had to baby step our way through some of the weather questions like icing and whatnot. Have you ever seen the Aviation Weather Handbook? I know I had a nickel for every time I heard a student had never heard about the Aviation Weather Handbook, I would be a rich man and I wouldn't have to do mock check rides.
My instructor actually told me I should read that yesterday. Our mock check ride was yesterday. He said he basically said the same stuff. He said, just study up on some of the weather and read more of the POH.
Yeah, and I mean that's really where I would say is Aviation Weather Handbook, POH. Everything else was pretty solid. Any kind of pilot's handbook of aeronautical knowledge stuff like the PHAC was all pretty straightforward. You understood what it takes to ensure that an airplane is airworthy. Maybe actually go read 91.213 because 91.213, that's another one that students like they kind of memorize how to respond to it, but they've never actually read the regulation. So I would just say go read through that. There's also an advisory circular. What is it? I think is it 6167 alpha? I think it's 6167 alpha. That's the one that talks through inoperative equipment. Maybe it's 6197. Either way, it talks through inoperative equipment and how to handle it. And it even gives you like a little flow chart.
Okay. Sounds
good. But beyond that, I'd say pretty solid. Just those two big books that we talked about, the POH and the Aviation Weather Handbook, and you'll be ready to go.
All right. Thank you.
Now, have you ever used Discord before? I know you've been in, I know I kind of bailed on you because I was sick.
Yeah, you're good. I'm on Discord a lot.
Okay, so you understand how this works. So don't be a stranger. When you do go take your check ride, come back and tell us about it. There's a whole check ride gouge section in this Discord channel or in this Discord server. There's pilot training and whatnot. What are we up to? We're up to 8 other flight instructors in here that are here to answer questions in the event that, I'm not here to answer anything that if you're running through your training and whatnot. Or you're running through your studying and something comes up.
Yeah, right? Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
Well, you got any other questions?
No, I can't really think of anything right now, but if I have something, I'll put it in the Discord.
All right. Sounds good, man. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.